Welcome back, my erudite friends, to another edition of MonteCristo's Overwatch League Power Rankings, the Thinking Fans Power Rankings. Today we'll be looking at the number 10 through number 1 positions after 1 week of competition in Stage 2. We will not be referencing movement. We will start that again this week, considering that we have a new metagame to appreciate in the new season, or stage rather, of the Overwatch League. You can also check out the 20 through 11 power rankings, also on this channel. To begin with today, we are going to be looking at number 10, which is the Toronto Defiant. Now, Toronto Defiant have fallen pretty far from their last ranking, but a lot of that was due to some roster instability that we've seen from Toronto, including losing Stellar to retirement and picking up a very unknown player who was in open division only a month ago and played briefly on a contenders roster before suddenly being elevated into the professional scene in IM37. Now, IM37 does seem to have a lot of raw talent and a high ceiling and looks like a good scouting from Coach Bishop, but there were some issues with his play. Sometimes he wouldn't reset properly. He does look very raw when it comes to communicating with his teammates, and certainly still needs to build up a storehouse of knowledge around how to play at the professional level. But encouraging signs for the future nonetheless, looked very mechanically good and like a quick learner. So I'm excited to see his play develop. But until he gets more integrated with the team, it's going to be hard to place the Toronto Defiant higher. Also, I'm still seeing some of the issues that I saw with the Defiant from last season, which is that they don't change team compositions very effectively, and that is much more important this stage than it was last stage, with all of the new looks that we're seeing teams throw at each other, with bunker compositions, different kinds of goats, multi-DPS compositions, so their shot calling in-game still seems like it could use some work. They also were reverse swept by the Boston Uprising, and they lost a map to the Washington Justice. They may be too low right now, honestly, but until they integrate the rookie better and clean up some of their compositional swaps in-game, I'm hesitant to put them higher. At number 9 is going to be the Philadelphia Fusion. And I know they struggled a bit against the Florida Mayhem last week, and they did get absolutely destroyed by the NYXL. And coming into this stage, you would have thought that this was going to be a better meta, where Carpe could go back onto some of these DPS picks, same with EQO, who's still a star DPS player on this roster. But the Philadelphia Fusion really looked out of sorts against the NYXL. You'd also think that playing Winston Goats, which is better on this map pool and better on this patch, would be serving them well, but it just hasn't seemed to materialize in a very meaningful way yet. My other concern with the Philadelphia Fusion is, especially against the Florida Mayhem, when they look good, they look really good. That's the elite team that we expect them to be. We should be talking about the Philadelphia Fusion in the top 5 teams in this league, I think, during this patch. And they certainly look like it at times. But then they make a lot of uncharacteristic and sloppy mistakes when they're trying to close out these maps. So they'll look really, really good against the Florida Mayhem for 90% of the map, but then fall apart at the very end for no real discernible reason. And that's what needs to be changed, I think, for the Philadelphia Fusion if they really want to consider themselves a top team here in Stage 2. At number 8 is going to be the Chengdu Hunters. And I think you could make some arguments for the Chengdu Hunters to be lower, especially after their match where they struggled at times against the Washington Justice. But they did close out that series in the end, and even though they weren't great at times, they were still able to claw their way back into these maps against the Justice and have some impressive holds against a Washington team that is looking at least slightly better. Their really big win was against Paris, which looked dominating. It's also the fact that this team was already running all these DPS heroes in the last patch, and they were looking good at it, even if it wasn't an ideal meta. And now it does play into the meta significantly better. So Chengdu, with the Wrecking Ball buffs, certainly has benefited. with more DPS heroes on the table certainly has benefited. Jin Musfara and Hanzo play continues to be mechanically sound. So this is a team that I think is still going to be able to pull out quite a few wins overall in this stage. And they have a chance to really go 3-0 this coming week against the Shanghai Dragons, and I think we expect them to do so. If they go 3-0, they really only have to win one other match this stage to have a fighting shot at being in the stage playoffs, which would be really fun, I think, for Chengdu Hunters fans, considering how much of a delight it is for everybody to watch this team play right now. Number 7, again a team which might be a little bit too high, is the London Spitfire. London, another team that should benefit from the changes to DPS. I still think London has problems identifying when they need to switch compositions, but that said, they did go 2-0. And if I had just watched the first map where they struggled against the Florida Mayhem, even though Florida also looks maybe a little bit better with this roster, it was really the match that they played against the Atlanta Reign. We needed to see a return for London to a very dominant status for them to be moving into the top 8, and that's what we got from the Reign, was a one-sided match. London looked crisp, they looked clean. Whether this is going to be sustainable for them or not, we'll have to wait and see. We do get a rematch of the London-Philly game that Philly won in Stage 1 this coming week, and I think that's going to be important for both of these teams and might very well be the best Overwatch League match this week. Number 6. Even though they've only won in reverse sweeps this stage, is the Boston Uprising. They are the backwards janitors of the Overwatch League right now. But what's so good about this team is they integrated RCK very quickly on a short timeline, so I expect RCK to gel further with this team that's already 2-0 in the future. They did beat the Toronto Defiant and the Atlanta Reign, not the highest ranked teams, so again, this team may be a touch high, and it is disturbing that they haven't been able to win the first 2 maps of either of their series. And in fact, even the series before that in Stage 1, considering they've won 3 reverse sweeps in a row right now. But RCK, I think, performs very well. Color Hex has started to have a bit of a breakout after being a poor Zarya player, has had some really impressive Widowmaker play, so it looks like the meta might be trending in their direction towards their strengths. I think the trade for RCK was very smart of them so that they could actually start playing the Sombra out of a flex tank position and have a few more DPS options on the table, even though they do lose some value in Diva play. RCK is also clutch, and I think that's what's so impressive about this Boston roster, is that yes, they've had to win maps at the very last second with some big clutch plays, but they've managed to do it. And if you also look at their match against the Atlanta Reign, they're making very smart decisions. So, for example, Fusions will change calls, like on the map on Gibraltar, where they will play a very aggressive Rhine defense because of a large time bank. So they're able to adapt extremely well in-game. They have strong in-game shot calling, they have strong coaching and strategies going in, and now they have flexibility and a meta that I think is better to their DPS players. So number 6 right now, hopefully they'll start playing a little bit better in the early game and stop giving their fans heart attacks, because it must be very hard, I think, to be a Boston fan right now and be praying for these reverse sweeps. At number 5 is the Seoul Dynasty. Seoul really shooting up the rankings. They lost to the Gladiators, and that was their only match this week. Obviously, we are considering a little bit the fact that they upset the NYXL in the playoffs, and that was a very strong showing from Seoul. And they still get a lot of value, I think, out of their Sombra play from Michelle. Michelle, I think, is a rising star in the Overwatch League this season on both Sombra and Diva. But playing the Gladiators close and forcing that 5th map does say a lot about this team. They've looked much more consistently good, even when they're not playing Fleta, like they did this last week with Fitz. So they've started to coalesce around Fissure. Fissure demands a lot of this team's resources in order to be kept alive, but he's also just an insane playmaker, and it's a treat to see his Winston again. So Seoul Dynasty still going to be up near the top right now. Jae Hong looks like he's coming back into form. He's able to play Samana again, which is very exciting for old school Overwatch fans. And they're playing close matches or winning against other top teams, and this makes a big difference. Number 4 is the LA Gladiators. Struggled a bit at the start of last stage, came into their own by the end, and this week they come in. They play two pretty good opponents in the Shanghai Dragons and the Seoul Dynasty. They win both of these matches. They're looking better and better as time goes on, as Decay and the tanks seem to be gelling with their backline right now. The supports are doing very well. They have a lot of flexibility in their DPS roles. Remember, last season, the Gladiators were always one of the best teams about running a DPS rotation, giving players a chance to come in for a map, then leave. We're starting to see that with Surefour being reintegrated into the roster right now. They're always going to be strong at these DPS roles with Surefour, Hydration, and Decay, all able to play with vast hero pools in these roles. Their tank and support lines are also very strong. Overall, just a really good team, well coached as well. And so Gladiators, I think, they have a chance to sort of break into the Elite Three, as we think of them right now, as sort of a gulf between the top 3 teams and the rest of the league. And, of course, for the Elite Three, at number 3 is the NYXL. NYXL coming off another playoff disappointment, but chaining that into not even losing a map. They did draw one with the Shanghai Dragons, but not even losing a map here in Stage 2, Week 1. Their opponents were Philadelphia and Shanghai, just looking strong overall. They didn't have the toughest competition, it must be said, but they looked really dominant, especially against the Philadelphia Fusion. Their problems in the stage playoffs with Mono and Meko looking a little bit off their game. Mono, once again, looking like potentially the best tank in the league in this week of competition, so whether it was nerves in the stage playoffs or whatever have you, it does seem to be mostly gone right now. I'm excited to potentially see some of their players returning from the bench. Perhaps Pine, if he's going to be playing some Widowmaker. We have Junkertown in the map pool this stage. Certainly an opportunity to play Pine on a map that he has historically played for the NYXL. So they still have that depth at that position, even though they've been running Nene for the most part at DPS right now. Nene's busted out the Widowmaker, still one of the best Zaryas in the league, still perfectly capable of playing long-range hit scan, but we do miss a little bit of that Pine styling and that Pine flash that we got to see last season. Overall, NYXL, still one of the elite teams, still one of the teams to beat. Number 2, San Francisco Shock. Barely lost in those Stage 1 playoffs, but you know what? They bounced right back. 8-0. They are top of the standings right now. 2-0 in matches, +8 in map differential, and looking just as scary as they did coming into those stage playoffs. They fixed a lot of their problems in terms of choking and overtime fights that we saw late in the stage. They had vanished by the stage playoffs. That's one of the main reasons that they were able to play up against the Vancouver Titans so closely and force it all the way to that map 7. Sinatra is still looking like a world beater. I love the fact that they've started to put Rascal on the Batiste. It gives them a lot of healing options for Sinatra, and I think that this hero coming out, and Rascal, who has traditionally learned new heroes in Overwatch very fast after they've been released, is great because it plays to their style. Sinatra is able to position aggressively. They can heal him at range with the Batiste. They can power him up with the Amp Matrix. So these are all excellent options as a team for the Shock, and they're playing around the new hero very well. Krusty looks like he's really identified how to use Batiste to his team's strengths, and that has meant very solid results for the San Francisco Shock so far. Easily a contender to win this stage, especially because of the Titans maybe not being quite so good, but that's not going to prevent the Titans from being our number 1 team. Reason, of course, being Stage 1 champions. Reason, of course, being we only saw one map. It was on the last day of this week, but that match was against the Hangzhou Spark. They absolutely dominated the Spark. We got to see Stitch for the whole match, so they're bringing in more of their DPS specialists instead of playing So Min Soo. Allowed them a little bit more flexibility. Stitch still performed very well on the Zarya. Whether that's going to be a consistent strategy going forward against top teams, I think remains to be seen, but Stitch was bringing some of his signature hit scan play into the mix as well, so they've already started to make some of these adjustments to their roster. That said, they can't get much better than they did last stage, where they set a stage win percentage record of 80% of their maps won. That was even higher than 79% that the NYXL had in stage 2 of last year. Now, I know NYXL played more matches. There were 10 matches instead of 7 in stages last year. It's true, but they still beat that record and were on pace with the NYXL. So it shows their level of dominance. It's unlikely the Titans are going to be quite as good as they were last stage, because how could you really? And especially with Gladiators being more in form right now, Shock still looking dominant and having more depth at skill positions like DPS that I think are going to be important. And NYXL, if they can avoid some of these potential choking issues in the playoffs, they will still be a contender also. So maybe the Titans won't quite be as strong. A good test will be their first match of the next week of competition in Stage 2, which will be the Seoul Dynasty. That could end up being a very close match, could end up going all the way to 5 games. Possible, but unlikely that Seoul might be able to win it. Thank you very much for tuning in to this week's Power Rankings. I will see you in 2 weeks' time to revisit some of these rankings, and we'll see how the teams have moved.